Okay, so we're here to talk a little bit about vertical bigway in general, and also our experience from the 200 vertical world record last summer, world record attempt. Spoiler alert, it didn't happen. So we're going to start off with a bit of the basics about bigway and how to put things together, and then look at some great video of what not to do. And then we'll watch some of the videos from last summer and talk a little bit about what happened and what didn't happen. So we're going to start with a bit of a history lesson. I took this from the FAI website, so if you believe it to be incorrect, don't come to my door. So the first FS record officially was 1973. They built a 12-way. And the very first vertical record was submitted in 2003, where they built a 24-way. So in terms of records, it's fairly modern in records. Some interesting things. It took 13 years from them to get to 12 to 100 in FS. In vertical bigway, it took just 6 years from the first record before they built a 100-way. I'm going to have a guess. A lot of that is because back in 1973 they didn't have access to a hangar full of twin otters they could easily roll out, but I thought that was interesting. But then from 100 to 200 they did it in just 6 years, whereas the 100-way was in 2009 for vertical flying, and we're yet to break 200 13 years later. So also from the first one to 200-way, it was 19 years, and from the first one of vertical flying to 19 years later would have been this year, so it would have been a great year to do it, but didn't quite happen. All right, do you want me to carry on, Martin, or do you want to go for this one?
You do this one. You're doing great.
Take the whole thing?
You're doing great, keep going.
Okay, so the basics of a vertical formation. So they generally all follow the exact same formula. So we have a round base, and then off of the base we build what are called pods. So they're always 5-way pods, so we'll have 2 people on each side, and then somebody would come in and close that, and pretty much every vertical bigway has followed that exact same formula up until now. So this is the existing UK head-down record. So as a 6-way base, you've got the 5-way pods, and then we put bridges connecting the pods. And just as you scale up, the base gets bigger, which means you can put more pods onto it and then bring more arms off of it. And this is the existing 164-way world record. And again, they all look very similar, just scaled up. I think when we look at FS formations, you see all of these crazy patterns, and they don't really seem to have the same set kind of, you must have a round base and build from there. And I think that's largely because in FS, no matter how you put the formation together, I mean, everybody's on their belly with their own bit of air. Whereas in head down, we fly a lot with our legs. So if we've got lots of grips coming off at all different angles and tried to build some complex formations, we'd be burbling our legs a lot, which is just going to create tension, and inevitably it's just not going to build. So that's the formula. It's always been the formula. It seems to work, but at 200-way, it's starting to feel like maybe we need to revisit it a little bit, because they've had 2 years of 200-way attempts now, and both failed. So I'm sure that will be in the organisers' thoughts coming into the next one. Over to you, I think, Martin.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that makes it difficult, right, with formations that makes VFS, or like, is you've only got hands, whereas belly, like, you can do it on people's feet and you can make interesting shapes, whereas for vertical, you can't really have people on people's legs. So then you run out of different shapes you can do. So I guess now we're going to talk a little bit about the different slots in head down bigway. People often ask, like, what's the easiest slot? I'm not very good. Like, what's the best slot? Like, I guess the bad news is there's not really an easy slot. They're all hard in their own way, and for all of them, you need to be a very strong head-down flyer to do head-down bigway, or you'll be bailing out the formation, as we'll see later. So we'll start with the base. Generally, you want your base flyers to be like big people because the base needs to go fast. Similar to like belly, you don't want, it tends to slow down as people get on. So you want to make sure that the base is not your smallest people and that they're very strong flyers because they will get like tugged around and pulled around as everyone like docks on with too much momentum. So if you play the video, we can have a quick look at basically, this is the base from one of the early jumps on the record. So it looks like they're actually going like, I mean, they're getting really pulled around there. Quite carnagey. You can see everyone in the background zooming around as the base has been like rotated. So the base needs to be super strong because if like someone docks on and it gets rotated, it will screw 50 people that were waiting behind them up. So you really need to keep it lined up. So both from exit, they need to keep it lined up and do that. Is it coming in? Cool. That looks like utter carnage. Glad I'm not in the base. They also probably have like the sketchiest break off. So base on a bigway tends to be, you know, hand-picked by the organizers and pick some big guys that you trust, or girls. Cool. First and second stingers. So that's in the pods that Dan showed. You got your first stinger as the person either docking on the base or docking first on a pod. You usually want your first stingers to be very good flyers, especially the people docking onto the base. They'll be your absolute rock stars because they need to be there very quickly so that everyone else can start building. Because once the 10-way base is built, only 10 people can build on. So you want to make sure that you're able to build the formation as quickly as possible. If one of them's waiting, there's 30 people behind them that are just flying there waiting with nothing to dock on. First thing is also, as Dan kind of mentioned, like it's a bit harder. You've generally got like the base or people in front of you that will be burbling your legs. So people might prefer left hand versus right hand stinger, depending on which foot you predominantly fly daffy. What we haven't really mentioned is that a lot of people learn shelf in the tunnel these days. And it's great for flying, but for head down big way, you generally see people flying daffy because you're a bit more stable. You can take the odd hit from behind or a pull in any direction rather than shelf if you get pushed or pulled forward versus backwards. It's a lot easier to bail. So you'll see kind of in the video here, I mean, not quite sure what this guy's doing, but otherwise everyone's half doing a daffy at least. Yeah. Arguably they should probably have straighter legs and go faster, but we'll see. Yeah, and then second stingers, it's very similar to first stingers, arguably a little bit easier because you've got a bit more space. So long as your first stinger is presenting their grip once they've got on nice and strong, then it's easy to come in and pick that up. So if there is an easy slot, it's probably your second stinger. Cool. And then next have a look at pod closers. Arguably probably like my least favorite slot and one of the harder ones in terms of you've got to have quite a lot of spatial awareness and you've got to have a lot what's going on. So you've got to pick up the two grips, get the pod on level and line it up with the base, especially from the first formation picture we saw, there's like 4 pods in a row and they need to be lined up. And generally they might not be. So your pod closer's got to pick up the grips, get it on level, which we'll talk about what on level is in a bit, and then line it all up, all while kind of flying and being aware of everyone around you. So it's not probably the slot you want to do on your first head down big way. But if we play the video, you'll see, is it this guy's pod closing basically? So he's got to pick up both the grips and then basically line it up square with this guy, get it, accelerate it to get it on level and present it nice and big. So he's done a good job there. And you can see can be difficult as well because as the pod behind starts building, it's very easy to get like dragged backwards. So you'll see the pod closer trying to like not let himself get dragged backwards and put tension through the rest of the formation and basically just try and like hold the people behind him strong and keep no tension on the base because if it starts pulling the base apart, then it will get really crazy. Cool.
If I hit play, just talk a bit about the bridge.
Ah, yeah, the bridge. So the bridge is built between the pods to basically add sort of another pod in there. So where is the bridge building here? I think this is the bridge.
Yeah.
So basically, as soon as that pod's built, they can sort of build a mini bridge or like a mini pod between those two ones. And the bridges are hard because, as you can see, that pod is not staying still. The first stinger, this guy, is trying to like get on a pod that's moving and present. There's not much space for your legs. You can easily get burbled. We had constant problems in this record with the bridges taking a long time to build, or if the pod closer isn't quick, then the bridge guy can't get on because he wants to wait till the pod's built so that he can get on. So we had problems with the bridges taking a long time to build, or the first stingers on the bridge not being able to get on, or them being too far apart. Again, if the pod closer doesn't line it up, you'll have two pods that are too far apart, and the bridge won't be able to reach unless you've got Tim as closing the bridge. I won't be able to close a bridge if the two pod closers don't line it up. Conversely, on the other side, if they're too far apart in one radial, the next side will be too close together, and there won't be room for a third person. So we saw a lot of problems in this vertical record with bridges in general, and it's definitely a tough slot to be in. Cool. I think that's you.
Me, I think.
Pretty.
So now we'll have a little look at the plane formation. So this is taken from the back of the lead Skyvan. And one of the things we can do with vertical bigway, because we have the ability to fly up to it, because the base is probably doing 170 miles an hour, something around that region. So if you're flying on your back, you can probably do close to 100 mile an hour if you're tracking up to it. And conversely, the divers can be doing over 200 miles an hour coming down to it. So rather than with an FS formation, predominantly everybody is pretty much diving down to it, we can actually make use of that to have the base, in theory, come out in the middle of everybody. So we'll have half of the formation leave before the base comes out of the lead plane, and then half the formation coming out after. And that also means we can have the planes a little bit closer together, because the approaches can be a bit more vertical rather than people finding it easier to come from a bit farther apart. So, but sometimes the planes can get a little bit too close together, and if you just click that video on the right, this is one of the shots from the record, which I found quite funny, which is Steph desperately trying to communicate with the autopilots to move farther apart because the base thought they were going to hit the wings as they jumped out.
Yeah, that's how close the wing is. The contrast
the two
of it
wingtips there.
Yeah. Like usually they're always like the first jumps, they're like, sorry guys, the planes need to get closer together, the pilots are working on it, they're working on it. I think they worked on it a lot for this record, and they were so close.
So if you skip to the next one. So this was the plane formation for the 200 way this summer. And you can broadly say anything below the piece of paper are floating, and anybody this side are diving minus the base coming out of the lead plane. So what that means, if we look at the colours, so all the blue people are the people most on the outside. We've got the orange guys somewhere in the middle, and the green next, and then the yellow at the base and the first stingers. So from the floating planes, all of the green people who are closest to the center are actually at the back of the plane, because we'll send a super floater out from the base, and that will be the key for all of these floating planes to start leaving. So the people at the back of the planes are going to end up furthest away, and in theory, if the timing's right, the people at the front of the plane should come out just as the base comes out. And then the divers, you have the people closest getting out first, and then the people furthest away diving out from the back. And the other bit of a nuance we have with dirt diving and vertical bigway is obviously everybody's flying upside down. So if we're walking this, then we need to flip everything over. So what is left trail when we're walking the dirt dive actually needs to become right trail for the sight picture to be the same. So we generally walk everything flipped, which can be a little bit confusing for some people when they first start it. So if we jump on to the next one. So we'll have a little look at a few videos of the exit timing. So if we start this one, you'll see Steph, who's a super float, she goes off first. And that's the key for all of the floating planes to leave. And then if you pause it a little bit further, there. So you can see now from these floating planes, pretty much everybody has left now. You can see all the dots, and the same with the floating planes down on the outside. Most people should be out. And then as the next group leave, that will be the key for the start of these planes to start leaving. And then that's the base that's just come out, and then in theory that should all come together, half the formation floating up and half the formation coming down. And then the next video, so this is from the floating angle. So this is first people out floating, you get out and you look, and then you're looking for the base just coming out of the lead plane somewhere up there.
Sorry, I was trying to pause at the right point, because that plane formation is so good. Firstly, and also we did, the people that were some of the tryout camps, we had like a 2-plane formation, and they were way, way further apart than the lead plane to like the far plane. So to have like 7 planes there or whatever it is, it's pretty good. Okay.
It usually takes a few jumps to figure out the timing. So if we play the third video, this will be a few examples of from a first stinger slot. So they should be out closest to the base. So this first one, they've come out and they're a little bit early. So looking around, and actually the base was still in the plane for a little bit. So they've still got a little bit of a float up to that base. And then the second one is the opposite, where the base actually went a little bit before them. So they end up with a little bit of a dive. So quite often in those close slots, you've got to be super on it as soon as you get out, because if the time is not perfect, you might be floating or you might be diving. And then this third one's perfect. They come out, the base is right there, and that's what we want. They can get on it straight away and start building everything quickly. Because in a free fly formation, we have about 50 seconds from exit to the start of break-off. And I'd say from an exit height of about 20,000 feet, a FS jump, what, a minute and a half, something like that?
20 minutes.
Or more. So we've got to be quicker. What's next? Do you want to move on?
About 75 seconds from one.
75.
I was getting 100 seconds in free fall, not 100
100 seconds until break-off?
Yeah, in free fall, so including break-off.
Ah, okay.
But working time would be about 75.
Yeah, I think we were getting 50 seconds working
50
time
seconds.
from 20 and a half K.
Yeah, to the start of break-off.
Yeah. Cool.
So a little bit about the approach to formation. So traditionally in FS, you have the stadium approach. So everybody, if you imagine a stadium, like as it comes out, it gets higher so people can see the whole formation as they're approaching and coming in to find their slot. And we do something similar in free fly. So if we look at the picture like this, it looks kind of similar with everybody approaching from above and coming down into the formation, so looking across it. Whereas if we click it one more, in reality, this is what is happening. So everybody's actually below the formation and then floating up to it. So what we call on level in a big way is actually probably what you would consider from an FS point of view like low on it, because we need to keep that speed going fast. As soon as it starts to flatten out, the speed slows up, that adds a lot of tension in all the grips, and then it's going to start blowing up really quick. So this is just a little bit of a video example of that shape. If you pause it there, Martin. So you can see this side is looking pretty good. I'm not just saying that because that's our side. There's Martin there.
Oh, yeah.
But and then on this side, you can see there's some people that are doing okay, but like up here, that's definitely off level. He's not going to be able to see his cross partner over here. Some of these people also, they should be down in this space a little bit more.
Cool. What's next?
Break off, your specialty.
I like break off because it's, I don't know, it's scary. So break off, like for any sort of big way ride, is the kind of bit where safety starts getting involved, and you actually need to be careful because your risk of dying from a canopy collision is definitely increased if you don't do a good break off. So with 200 people, we have 4 different break-off waves. We have one break-off wave for sort of all the outside people, which is just going to be a big, long track. So that's 100 people on the outside, going from 7,500 to 4,000 feet. So it's quite a long track, and we don't have it labeled here, but we generally have these track in like one pod. So you'll pick one of these 2 people, and they'll lead a little mini tracking dive for a little bit, just to keep everyone nice and tight together, set a good angle, because you've got to go from a vertical angle to like a nice flat track, as opposed to sort of belly where the speed doesn't change so much as you go from like belly flying to tracking. So we'll have basically 10 mini tracking dives heading away, and that's awesome fun, like tracking away from a giant formation with like, you know, Dan and Greg and other people there, like tracking as hard as you can.
I'm glad you're having fun. I wasn't.
I had fun on the first one until I had a near canopy ride. So what was I going to say? Yeah, so what's interesting is if you kind of work out how far you need to track, say you want something like 50 meters either side of you to a nearby canopy people, you've got 100 people there, 2 pi r, you need to track like a kilometer, right? You need to track over a kilometer to have 50 meters of space, basically. So you're like, you better be good at tracking.
I studied maths at university.
I worked it out before. And then you've got this inside wave, and we'll go through a little diagram in a second. So you've got these orange people are basically doing like what we call a clear and pull. So after the first wave's gone, they're going pretty soon afterwards. So they're going 1,000 feet lower, but unlike belly, 1,000 feet lower is not very long. It's like 4 to 5 seconds. So they're not going very long after that, and they're basically just tracking away until they're clear and pulling immediately. And then you've got sort of 2 other smaller waves that are both basically tracking. And then these guys, the last people in the base, are doing 4, 5 to 3. And I watched some of the videos of that, and I don't think they were pulling at 3 from some of the videos I saw. So it is a bit different to belly, because I think in belly, like I pulled up one of the 158-way belly stuff, and a lot of them have like no pilot chutes above 3.5, whereas here we have, you know, this wave is pulling at a minimum of 4, because they need to make sure they're not like minimum. Yeah, don't pull lower than 4. And then these people also like pulling high. So if you jump maybe 2 slides on, Dan. So this is maybe like what you might think the more traditional break-off would be in belly of, you know, different waves going at different heights, everyone tracking to sort of 3,000 feet. And this is, I pulled this off of the belly 158 way. So that's the more traditional one. Looks great, looks nice and safe. If you go back, this is the freefly one, which does look a little bit like, looks a little bit sketchy, I'm going to be honest. But again, it's because of the large difference in speeds between when you're tracking versus when you're in the base going down. These people will be deploying before this base is really even broken off. So you're not really pulling on top of other people there. You are getting away from the formation. And we'll see in the videos in a second, these people are basically deploying first, and the base hasn't even broke off. So there's not risk of any problems there. Assuming you don't have low or have a cutaway.
One thing just to point out as well with the thought process behind this is that because we're flying much faster, like the amount of seconds between when the first wave goes and the second wave goes is not very many. So often that second wave, they'll turn around and the whole of the first wave will still be like pretty close, like have just turned around. Whereas the amount of time, if you had 2 similar waves in an FS formation, you turn around and it might be more like 5, 6 seconds plus, and the first people should be a little bit further away. But you'll see in some of the videos, the second wave going and the first wave are still right behind them.
Oh,
so
yeah, like
you need
sketchy.
that second wave to kind of create the separation between the first and third waves, who are both going further.
Yeah, definitely. And especially as they start unofficially lowering the break-off height, because they had one break-off where I think, you know, or we've had it on other formations, like even Project 19 had it, right, where someone's getting on one side of the formation and someone else has broken off on the other side of the formation. And if like that person didn't break off, then you could have had a record. So you never want to be the first person to let go. And then they start saying, you know, make sure you really hear your ditter before you let go. So that 7.5 break-off starts coming down to 7 or something like that. And then you've got maybe 2 seconds between the wave. So this is going to be wave 1 break-off. So this is the outside people on a little tracking dive. So this guy's leading it off on his belly. Everyone else should be on their back. Track with him for a little bit, roll over, check your airspace. Bit of a difference in vertical separation there, which isn't ideal. So basically lots of looking around to make sure you're not about to hit someone. And then hopefully have an on-heading opening. If you don't have an on-heading opening, very important to like fix it and keep flying away from the formation, and definitely don't fly back. So yeah, being very like aware of where you are all the time, very important. Is this the clear and pull wave?
I think so.
Yeah. So you see the first wave's going, you're really not that far behind them. Like they've only just started going. Like if you want, like, I don't know whose footage it is, they could join that group if they want. So it's important, like Dan said, that this clear and pull wave, like you need to let these people go further, hence not tracking so far. Yeah. And basically just trying to get clean airspace. There's only 20 people in this wave, so you don't have to track very far or for too long. Well, okay, slightly over top of that person, great. Little barrel roll. Again, I quite like this. This wave is probably my favorite because you've got loads of canopy height, so you can let most of the people land before you. You're the canopies that's open the highest by far, so you'll be landing, even if you're on a high performance canopy, which everyone is, you'll be landing near the back, not in all the canopy traffic, so it's a great wave to be in. And then here we've got the base. So you see all the waves, so that's wave 1 going, that's wave 2 going, that's the 3rd wave going, and that's the 4th wave going. So the break-off happens pretty quickly. There's not a lot of time between the waves. I think this is the video where, yeah, they really make sure there's clean airspace. Bear in mind, they broke off at 4.5. Yeah, this is J. Russ's. Like, I'm not sure if that was the one that looked the lowest or maybe it cut off, but I don't know. I think 3, let's say it was 3, but I'm not sure it was. There was people like, I barely finished taking my slider off and doing my admin, and I saw a couple of the organisers, people in the base, literally landing, and I was like, oh, nice. Cool. Now,
this is my favourite part. I'm looking forward to this bit.
Yes, this has got the best videos.
So these are some of the things that if you want to stay on the jumps to the end, that you don't want to be doing, because the organisers will see it. Right, what have we got up first? Overfloating. This is one of the easiest to do and one of the quickest ways to the bench. So, because you have that, you can do probably 100 mile an hour vertical speed compared to the base that's doing 170 miles an hour, and you're coming from far away, and it looks like you've got a really big distance to close. So people want to get there as quick as possible. But it feels like as you get close to the base, it's suddenly like, as you get close to level, like really speeds up. In reality, it's just because you're going so slow, or slow vertically, fast towards it. And it takes a while to accelerate as you get closer. But a lot of people get caught out, end up speeding up too late, and then just going way past it. And that creates a really dangerous situation. So if we play the first one.
Left one.
Yeah, this one over here. So like this person up here, he's overfloated. Some of these people, that guy a little bit. A couple of these people up here overfloated. And that was taken from one of the first jumps where everybody's super excited to get going. And you see it a lot. That's why at the record jumps this year, they had a rule where only like the inner 50 people were expected to take a dock. Everybody else, it was optional, just to try and calm it down a little bit. And as you can see, that didn't really work out. So the next one, what have we got here? A couple there. So this guy here was interesting. So he had massively overcooked it, and he had also, you'll see him come in down here in a second, he'd actually turned like backwards to help him slow down. So if you're driving forwards like this, you can turn around, which means you can put the brakes on, but you can't see what's coming behind you. So that creates a really dangerous situation. And it really stands out when the organisers are there watching the video, somebody coming through everybody like that, like you can't really miss it. So the third one, and now what happens when you're not lucky enough to go through everybody, keep an eye on, I think it's this guy, over here. He'll play again in a second in slow-mo. So I think keep an eye on this guy. Just wait in, doing a good job, somebody coming through, straight through him. So I can guarantee that guy wasn't on the next jump. And then this is the inside view of it. This guy actually did an awesome job to kind of keep everything together afterwards. Boom. Oof. That was a hard hit. And now, just consider, so the next video, we're just going to have a quick look at the speed of somebody diving. And now imagine this person diving, somebody overcooking, and then them having a collision. So if you play that top one, let's have a look at like these guys over here. Like the speed that they're diving down towards that formation. And if you've got somebody who's overfloating and they meet at the same point, like that's going to be a bad day, to put it lightly. So overfloating, take your time. I like to think of it more as waiting rather than floating. Like you're moving in kind of horizontally, but you're waiting for that base to catch you up rather than driving towards it. But inevitably everyone gets excited just to get there as quick as possible because, as I say, we've only got 50 seconds. Popcorning. So this was like a relatively new phenomenon about, I think the 2015 attempts is where they started seeing it a little bit more. So you can probably see what's going to happen based on that GIF. So let's play the first one. So you want to be watching around here somewhere. The guy just gets ejected out. And because the formation's doing 160 odd miles an hour, like if somebody corks, then they're just going up compared to it, which actually kind of makes it a little bit safer than if you had a two-way belly that funneled in on itself. I mean, that would be an amazing video, but hopefully we never see it. Whereas, yeah, it kind of, that person ends up getting spat out and relatively safe for them, but it means the jump's not going to complete because by the time they come back in around the back, like there's going to be no way to get back in. And then the next one, it can also be fairly innocuous. So that guy's gone there, but if you actually, when it plays again in slow-mo, like he just got a little burble on his legs, wasn't expecting it, and then just gone. So you've got to be a strong flyer as well. You should be able to take a little bit of burble and something like that. So that guy, I'm pretty sure, wouldn't have been on the next jump. And then the next one, this is my favorite one. So I don't even need to speak about this one, just watch. It's just everything going on. The guy goes up there, tries to come back down onto level, flies into somebody, they crash, hits somebody else, they go. Majestic.
Mm.
So yeah, we call this popcorning, and they started to think like it was happening more to people who were flying shelf, because if both your legs are behind you and you get a bit of a knock, it's much harder to kind of do anything about it than when you're flying daffy with one leg forward and one leg behind. All right, on to the next one. What's next? So being off level, it's something that feels like it's not a lot, but it makes such a big difference in how the formation builds. So if you can open the video into full screen, then pause it straight away. So just watch this guy here. So he's going to reach for this grip a little bit, and then just that bit of off level and reaching for the grip is going to push into this guy. He's going to push into this pod. This pod's going to push into this bridge. These people are all going to chase it because it's moved. And like you'll just see this one off level grip being taken and how much of a chain reaction that then happens off the back of that. So like all of that was caused just by one guy taking a small grip off level. So being on level and taking the grip nicely makes such a big difference. If you've got just a couple of people doing that around the formation in a 200 way and 2 or 3 sections start moving like that quite quickly, like it just comes all over the place. Getting lost. This is another good video. So inevitably, like there's 200 people, you're trying to get there quick. You're not always going to find where you're going straight away. And if you don't, it's generally quite apparent. So if we keep an eye on this person here, so they actually think they're in the right place right now. So much so that this person who is in the right place, they tap them to say, you're in my slot, and then we'll see what happens.
Ignore the popcorn
And
in the
then
background.
suddenly the light bulb moment. Not that way, not that way. All the way around, keep going. So good. But, and whilst we're all enjoying that, and it is quite funny, when you're trying to build a record jump, if you've got one person getting lost like that, that's delayed this whole section here who are waiting for their person in front of them to build. Ignore that. Then they can't do anything. Everybody's there just waiting for this person to get around. So that's what, maybe 15 seconds in total lost just for that one person to get into the right slot. and that can be the difference between all of the other sections building and just that one section not getting there.
Yeah, because that whole sector is ready. Like everyone is waiting for that guy, right? And I think like that sector actually did a great job on this jump, right? I think that.
Yeah, we show that a bit later in the end, later on actually.
So they actually build.
So excessive movement. So we need everybody to fly quiet. If you're flying around with noisy legs, it just creates tension, and like we want everybody like this guy. So this guy is super still, really quiet legs. Whereas if you watch just generally what's going on around behind him, like it's just noisy and it makes things so hard to build. So if everybody can fly like that guy, it's going to build a lot cleaner. All right, next. So, and the other thing we started having for the first couple of days was just the grips not being picked up. Like everybody's getting there. We've got lots of time. That's usually the challenge, is getting everybody around the formation with enough time to pick up the grips. But we just found that people were almost being a little bit too cautious at the start with. And like, you're never going to have a perfect grip in like a vertical big wave. There's always going to be a bit of movement, a bit of waves, and you've just got to go in, get your grip, accelerate, and do your job there. But if you just watch like generally around, like everybody's there for quite a long time, and just the grips aren't really being picked up. Like everybody is just being a little bit passive. And when we've got 50 seconds, like you're just not going to get everybody on. So especially some of the later jumps where they started cutting people for this, and they were like maybe a half a second slower than where the organisers felt they could have picked up their grips, and they were gone.
Yeah, over the last two jumps, it was like brutal, and they were just desperate. There's two jumps left.
Yeah,
They're like, you probably could pick that up.
A couple of people
rotate
like,
someone else in.
Right on the outside that were just waiting for their grip. It was there, and then they got it, and the organisers were saying, you should have been there. And bad canopy flying just goes without saying. The organisers are always watching the landings, drop zone control is. And I saw drop zone control like really uptight at one point, and it was just because one person did a right-hand pattern when the set pattern was left, and like desperately trying to find out who that was. Inevitably, he got cut. So, good canopy flying.
Yeah, it was funny when there was a tannoy announcement for the person on the blue and red Valkyrie that did a right-hand pattern into the main landing area. Come to DZ control now. We know who you are. Don't make us find you.
Right, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about the 200 way from this year. So Martin's going to jump into a little bit about how we assemble what we call the vertical elite. How are we doing on time?
We probably, I'll go through this fairly quickly so that we can get to the other good stuff. So, yeah, I mean, we want to do a record of 200 people, right? So you need at least, let's say, 250 people to turn up in Chicago for the record, so that you've got 200 starting people plus a bench of 40 to 50 people. So you've got to get 250 people to Chicago, and you've got to pick them. So the tryout camps and the selection events start a whole year in advance. And the way they did it this year was they sort of allocated a certain number of slots to different regions or to different tryout camps. So for California, there'll be 40 slots. For Europe, there'll be 40 slots. For like Australia, Dubai, and something else, there will be 40 slots. So I think in the end, there was probably over 120 slots awarded to Americans, but there is a lot of jumping done in America, and it's probably easier for them to have tryout camps there. So they basically, at the tryout camps, you know, you try and do as many jumps as you can, trying to do multi-plane formation stuff. So in the European one, we were trying to do 3-plane stuff. In America, they were doing similar sort of stuff, 60 ways. You try and get to assess people, and then you get a scorecard like that where the organisers of the camp will assess how good you are at all of the skills. It can be very tricky to do the assessment fairly, because in the European camp we maybe did 3 multi-plane jumps, and the planes were in a terrible formation. So if you were floating from one of the rear planes, like half people didn't get there because the plane was so far back. So it can be tricky. In an ideal world, you'll get a nice scoring card that will say, yeah, you were great at floating, and your tracking was fine, your canopy handling was great, and you were nice and still in the formation, picked up your grip quickly, and you'll get a tick. and then you'll get offered a golden ticket, which means you can turn up to the record, and all it really means though is you'll be on jump 1. As Dan said, if you do anything bad, you'll get cut. And then they also handed out silver tickets, which was kind of a new thing I think they did this year, where it was basically like an official bench. So previously they've handed out just the tickets and then anyone could turn up to the bench. But this year they had a bit more of an official organised bench. So they offered these silver tickets, which was basically you'll be the first people that we rotate in when someone gets cut. Cool. On to the next one. So yeah, getting started. Can't remember what I was going to say here. But basically, yeah, getting there on day 1 in the auditorium, a nice motivational speech from Rook, who's the owner of Skydive Chicago, who's hosted the Vertical Elite and the Vertical World Records for the last over 10 years. Lots of dirt diving because you need to see what it looks like from the ground. So there's a picture from a drone of the dirt diving. And what I found when I did my first bigway, actually, which you can kind of see from that picture, is I was expecting 200 people to like actually look bigger. And maybe it does on belly because you're a bit further apart, but actually, like, it's not actually that big. Even if you're right out the back here, you can still see the base very clearly. So, walk it out on the lawn multiple times, make sure you know what you're doing, talk to your plane captain, sort out the plane things. Day 1, start smashing out the jump. So we had a quick warm-up day where we tried to do some single plane stuff, and then it was basically day 1 straight into 200 ways. So if we have a quick look at the day 1 video. So as Dan mentioned, the first 2 jumps, the grips for a lot of people were optional on the outside. Just the idea was get there safely, identify your slot, hang out close to the formation. You don't have to pick up the grip to try and calm stuff down. Cool. I mean, arguably not too bad for day 1. As you saw, there was a lot of issues with movements. While they said, don't pick up the grips, you don't have to pick up the grips, you could see some people were 100 meters away from the formation, so they were maybe being a bit liberal with the, you don't have to pick up the grip. A lot of movements, a lot of people like chasing it. To be fair, on jump 1, the base was rotated like maybe 30 degrees, so everyone I floated up in I was like, this is the wrong sector. So there's a lot of people carving around, starting to be a bit of beehives, not much an umbrella at all, level problems. So, everyone was roughly there. It wasn't terrible, but it was clear there was a lot of work to do after day 1.
So yeah, day 3, 2 and 3, it started to build a little bit bigger in some places, but on the whole, we were seeing a lot of the same stuff. Like, there was just a lot of movement, and every jump there seemed to be somebody being popcorned out of the formation. And we also had a good reminder to always expect the unexpected with bigway when everybody was stood on the red light and one of the otters had an engine failure. Luckily, it was on the outside, so it was able to move away easily. So, but interestingly, they decided this year, historically the cutting has been like really brutal, but they decided to work more on like moving people around a little bit, but keeping them on the formation and not using the bench too much. And but on the whole, it didn't really seem to improve that much. So then we moved to after the first jump on day 4, they decided that the 200 way wasn't looking likely with the time we had left, and then to cut it down to a 170. So basically they moved one of these pod closers out and then took a few people out from the outside to turn into this formation to go out for the last 2 days just to try and get a record. Seemed to be stuff like that on every jump. They're like, one person would make a bit of a mistake that would knock a few people out of place, and then just gives nobody else a chance. Really.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot to ruin one attempt.
No, once one person's gone out from near the centre of the formation, it takes so long for them to get back in, you just don't have time. And it can be really like demoralising when you're out on the outside waiting to come in and you see one person get popcorned out and you're like, well, that's over for another jump. But it started to get a little bit closer, like it's starting to look like the picture there. But inevitably it was just not quite there. Despite the best efforts every morning, we had like a really deep motivational video from Ryan Patrick, who creates these awesome productions to try and get everybody hyped up. This was the final jump on the last day, right at sunset. We took it right to the end.
Sunset jumps were fun. You just float. If you're floating up, everyone was black. You couldn't see a thing. Just I really hope the base hasn't rotated like it did last jump.
Like quite a few of the sections completed, but there was still about 2 or 3 of the arms with a few people out.
We even actually got a motivational speech from Dan BC.
That's true. I like this shot. How are we doing on time? We've only got...
We have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, right. Let's rush through this. So, why didn't it happen? I mean, historically, when they've got records, the cut-in has been like really strict. So any slight overflow, bit off level, you're gone. Whether that focuses people's mind a little bit more, whereas maybe people are starting to get a little bit lazy when they knew they could make mistakes and get away with it, who knows. Not enough rock stars, so you only got a slot by turning up at the tryout camps and earning your slot. So there's a lot of good skydivers, people like the Fly Warriors, who have, you could guarantee you can put them into this any slot and they're going to be there 100% of the time. Whereas I can understand they've done a lot of these things before, it's not cheap, and a lot of people like that weren't there, so maybe that made the difference. Also, it came after COVID, so a lot of people weren't jumping for quite a while, and there is a formation coming up in Europe this summer where they're going to try and build a 100 way without the bridges, because a lot of the problems seem to be coming from people popcorning out of the bridges. And is it possible? I think it is, for sure. So this was actually the 2018 attempts where they got much closer with only 9 jumps, whereas we did 14. So they're really close. If we watch this video quickly, So this was actually the 164-way current world record. And you can see how much smoother it is. Like, there's no like legs going everywhere. And I'm starting to think, like, you don't see that much just vertical flying these days. Like, a lot of people are doing angle flying, constantly moving around. Maybe back 6 years ago, there was a bit less of that, and everybody was used to just flying static and still, because that just looks like such a different thing. And if you added 30 more people to that, you would think it would happen the next jump. But also, like, it can build really quickly. So this is our friend who was the person that got lost. But then actually when they get on, like, how quickly this builds. Second stingers, pod closer, first stingers, second, pod closer, first stingers, second stingers, and right out to Greg, who was the last one on. Like, that whole thing built in 7 seconds. So we don't need a lot of time. We just need everybody to do their job. And how to get involved. So the next one will be in 2025. Do a lot of a lot of VFS flying, static flying, not just angle flying. The camps will start coming around 2024. I know Ali Milne and Paul Cooper are organising some vertical stuff this year. Go and find them. And just, yeah, static flying, I think, is the key. And then finally, we're going to close out playing one of the motivational videos. And if this doesn't get you motivated to go and get involved, I don't know what will.
You don't start things and not finish it. You don't quit. There's nothing that comes out of quitting besides knowing that you didn't finish. We finish everything. You start it, finish it. When I pick it up and say I'm gonna start it, I gotta finish it. It all don't work. It all ain't the best. It all ain't knocked out the park. But I walk away saying I finished it. I did it.
Don't try. Do. Forget about trying. Forget about making an attempt. Forget about testing it out. You don't want to go halfway. You don't want to just dip your toe in. You want to jump in hard. Do not try. Do. Go hard. It requires a tremendous amount of courage to say, I'm going to give this thing a chance. I'm going to give it my all. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. But I know that I tried my best. Where are the warriors that say, I'm going to make a decision and I'm keeping it? Go deep into all these things that you love, 100%. Devote yourself to something bigger. Be decisive about what you're going to do. Say, I'm going to do it, and that's it. And then be disciplined about getting it done every single day, whether you feel like it or not.
For the life!
And so that's us done. Hopefully you learned something, enjoyed some of the videos. Just want to say a quick thanks to Skydive Chicago for hosting it, Ryan Patrick, Jason Peters, Ewan Cowie, and Jason Russell for providing all of the videos and images that we showed today. Thanks. How do we do on time?
We have 2 minutes if anyone has any questions.
When are you organising the UK record, Dan?
And a quick question at the back.
As a comment, as a belly bigway guy, I think what you guys do is phenomenally impressive. And my other thought is, when we did a 246-way Skydive Chicago, it took us 24 tries. You guys might consider, I mean, I know it's Rook's call, but more opportunities will probably help with the success. Trying to do that in 14 is phenomenally aggressive.
Yeah, we did 19 jumps overall, including the 170 ways, but they took an extensive feedback form from everybody that was there, and I know Rook and Jason Russell and the like will be doing everything they can to prepare properly for the next one.
Rook's dad was more demanding. We had to be there for 8 days. But I was curious, has there been any consideration of color-coded jumpsuits, and do you think it would help?
So they started to use that in the first pods. So as you're approaching, you can see at least your sector easily. But I think they actually started to have a few issues with like the t-shirts not fitting quite right and it causing a bit too much drag for people who needed to go faster. So, but yeah, things like that are being considered, and I'm pretty sure as we move forward, like all of the smaller details, now we know it's not going to come easily, will get looked into a lot more.
Yeah, the Aussie pod that I was building on usually, they were doing coordinated t-shirts, but it changed every day. They would just be like, guys, it's blue t-shirt day today. So you're like, great. And then I got put in their pod and they're like, you need a yellow t-shirt. I'm like, I don't have a yellow t-shirt. So yeah, like, maybe it can help, but I don't think people worry about getting lost a lot when it's their first time doing that, but it's not generally that bad. Not too many people, other than the guy we pointed out a couple of times, get that lost. Yeah.
They did it for Project 19.
Yeah, the first pods helps just so that you're floating up and you're like, yes, that's my sector.
I think it can definitely help, but with the nature of how they tend to cut and move people around, like telling everybody to bring like multiple different color t-shirts that fits is, yeah. But I'm sure it'll be looked at. Any other final questions before we all go and enjoy ourselves at the main AGM? All right. Thanks
for
very
coming.
much.